He worked 2 years in a foreign land, carrying heavy boxes, just to buy his parents new clothes. But when he finally came home, he found something that broke him forever: music. Thomas was 20 years old, living under the same roof as his parents, George and Mary, but he was not truly present. Every morning, while his father George, a 50-year-old farmer, woke up before sunrise to work in the fields with his tired hands and aching back, Thomas was still asleep. Every afternoon, while his mother Mary, a gentle 40-year-old woman, cooked and cleaned and prayed for her son, Thomas was lost in his phone, scrolling endlessly, playing video games, laughing with friends who had no direction either. And every night, when George and Mary were already in bed, exhausted from their day, Thomas was out at clubs, dancing, wasting hours that would never come back. George never stopped trying. He would sit Thomas down and say, "Son, look at me. I'm getting old. These fields need young hands. Your mother needs your help. Stop wasting your life." But Thomas would lean back and say, "Dad, I don't want to work. I just want to live my life the way I like." And George would go silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because his heart was too heavy for words. Then came a day that changed everything. It was a regular evening, but George's patience had finally reached its limit. He looked at his son and said something he had been holding inside for years. "Thomas, you don't even have enough worth to buy your mother and me 2 simple sets of clothes. 2! That's all I'm asking. Can you do even that?" The words hit Thomas like a slap. He said nothing. He walked to his room. He sat on his bed in the dark, and for the first time in years, he felt something deep inside his chest. Shame, pain, a fire he had never felt before. That night, Thomas did not sleep. He stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying his father's words over and over again. And somewhere in the middle of that long, quiet night, something changed inside him. He made a decision. He was going to leave. He was going to work. He was going to come back with enough money to give his parents everything they deserved. The next morning, he called his best friend Daniel and said, "I need to get out of here. I need to work. I need to change." Daniel looked at him and said, "Then let's go. New York. We'll find work there." 2 days later, Thomas packed his bag. He folded his few clothes neatly, placed them inside, and before closing the bag, he looked around his small room one last time. He saw the old walls, the worn-out furniture, the simple life his parents had built with nothing but hard work and love. He whispered to himself, "I'll be back, and I'll make you proud." He hugged his mother Mary, who held him a little longer than usual, as if she knew something he didn't. His father George stood at the door, arms crossed, eyes soft. They didn't hug, but George nodded slowly, and in that nod was everything a father could never say out loud. New York was nothing like home. The city was loud, fast, and completely indifferent to a young man with no skills and no connections. Thomas and Daniel found work at a loading dock, carrying massive packages and containers, loading and unloading heavy shipments from early morning until their bodies gave out. The pay was low, the work was brutal. Some nights, Thomas could barely lift his arms, but he never quit. Every single morning, he got up, tied his shoes, and went back. After a long day of work, Thomas would come home to a tiny apartment he shared with Daniel. He would wash the dishes, cook simple meals, and sit alone in the quiet. And that is when the memories would come. He would see his mother, Mary, standing in the kitchen, humming softly while she cooked. He would see his father, George, coming home from the fields, dust on his hands, exhaustion in his eyes, but always a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself. Thomas would eat his simple meal alone and think, "I should have been there. I should have helped him. I wasted so much time." But he kept going. Months passed. Seasons changed. 1 year went by, then another. Thomas worked every day without fail. He saved every dollar he could. He denied himself comfort, entertainment, even rest, all so that one day he could walk through that door back home and finally make his parents smile. 2 years after leaving, Thomas counted his savings, $200,000. He held the number in his mind, and for the first time in years, he smiled. He went to the biggest mall he could find. He walked through the stores slowly, touching fabrics, reading labels, imagining the look on his mother's face when she opened the box. He picked out the finest suits for his father,
elegant, warm, dignified clothes worthy of a man who had spent his whole life in dusty fields. He picked out beautiful dresses for his mother, soft colors, fine material, the kind of clothes she had never allowed herself to buy. He stood at the counter with the bags in both hands and thought, "Dad, I did it. I finally did it." But at that very same moment, thousands of miles away, something was happening that Thomas did not know about. His father, George, the man who had worked under the sun for 30 years, the man who had never once complained, suddenly grabbed his chest. His face went pale. His knees buckled. Mary screamed and called for help. The neighbors rushed in, an ambulance came. George was rushed to the hospital and placed on a ventilator, his heart struggling to hold on. The doctors worked through the night, but by morning, the machines showed a straight line. George, the farmer, the father, the man who only wanted his son to become someone worthy, was gone. Mary stood in that hospital hallway, and the doctor walked slowly toward her. She already knew from his face. When he spoke the words, something inside Mary shattered completely. She walked to the room where her husband lay, and she looked at the man she had loved for over 20 years, lying still, connected to machines that no longer had any purpose. And in that moment, her own heart could not bear it. She collapsed. The doctors rushed to her, but it was too late. Her heart had given out too. Within hours of each other, George and Mary were both gone. The two people who had loved Thomas more than anyone in this world had left it, quietly, without their son beside them.
Their bodies were brought back home. The neighbors gathered. The house that once had the smell of Mary's cooking and the sound of George's quiet prayers was now filled with silence and grief. And somewhere on a crowded metro train, Thomas sat with shopping bags on both sides of him, smiling, rehearsing in his mind the moment he would knock on that door and surprise his parents. He imagined his mother covering her mouth in shock. He imagined his father trying to hide his pride but failing. He imagined finally being the son they always believed he could be. When Thomas reached his neighborhood and turned down the familiar street, he noticed something was wrong. There were too many people outside his house. There were no sounds of celebration, only silence, only tears. He walked faster. His heart started to pound. He pushed through the crowd and stepped inside. And then he saw them, his father and his mother, lying still, side by side, dressed in simple clothes, their faces peaceful, their hands cold. The bags fell from Thomas's hands, the suits he had carried across the city, the dresses he had chosen with so much love. Everything fell to the floor, and Thomas fell to his knees. He could not speak. He could not breathe. The cry that came out of him was not just grief. It was 2 years of missing them. It was every night he had spent alone thinking of them. It was every dollar he had saved for this moment. It was everything he had wanted to say and never said, pouring out of him all at once.
Days later, when the earth had been placed over them and the prayers had been said, Thomas stood alone at their graves. The sun was going down, the wind was still. He held the bags of clothes in his hands, the clothes he had bought to make them smile, and he placed them gently at the foot of the graves. He pressed his hand against the stone and whispered, "Father, I am sorry. I could not give you even one suit while you were alive. I wasted so much time. I thought I had more of it. I thought you would always be there, waiting. Please forgive me. Please forgive me." He fell to his knees on the grass, his shoulders shaking, his tears falling silently into the earth, and he stayed there until the stars came out. If your parents are still alive, go to them, call them, sit with them. You do not need money to make them feel loved. You only need your presence, your time, your heart, because the day may come when you are ready to give them everything, and they are no longer there to receive it. Do not let that day come. Honor them while you still can. Comment yes if you believe every child should cherish their parents before it is too late.